Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first North County Estate Planning Council meeting of 2021. Happy New Year to everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name is Ollie Ben. I'm the Director of Philanthropy for the Jewish Community Foundation. And since we went on lockdown, we've been very happy to help Bill and the NCEPC host these now webinars that used to be in-person meetings and hopefully will be again very soon in 2021. But as you all come into the virtual room, I just wanted to share very briefly a little bit about the Jewish Community Foundation as we get ready for Bill and Dennis. The JCF has been a proud partner of not just Bill and the NCEPC, but also of many different professional advisors for a very long time. We are the largest grant maker in San Diego, and we pride ourselves on the way we work with professional advisors in many different ways. One of the ways that I wish to highlight is that we have a trusted charitable advisor program, of which many of the attendees on this call have already participated. It is a fantastic cohort, it's a network, and it's a way to learn how to build relationships around philanthropic planning and charitable planning with your clients, which is something that I know a lot of professional advisors don't necessarily feel comfortable doing. So we give you the tools and advice to do that. If you're interested, you can go to jcfsandiego.org/TCA for Trusted Charitable Advisor, or reach out to our Chief Impact Officer, Charlene. Additionally, we work with professional advisors frankly, in a free capacity. We're always here to provide free advice to professional advisors in lots of different areas, and we are always available to do that, so feel free to reach out. And finally, before I turn it over to Bill, I just wanted to recognize that we have several families who are JCF fund holders on the call today who are very excited to be here, and so we wish to welcome them and thank them for attending. And with that, I'm very excited to turn it over to the man making his return, Mr. Bill Super.
Hey, thanks, Ollie. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. Hope you had a good holiday season in these challenging times. Well, welcome to the North County Estate Planning Council San Diego's kickoff 2021 webinar. I know you'll find today's speaker, Dennis Jaffe, a fascinating one, and more on Dennis and his presentation in a moment. I think we actually have some more families that are attending as well, so the more the merrier, and thank you all for being here. This program is really presented for both the professionals and the families themselves, and we'll take advantage of Dennis's many years of experience in dealing with multi-generational families, and we're looking forward to his presentation. A couple of announcements. Upcoming meetings for the North County Estate Planning Council. February 2nd, we continue our planning for the $30 million to $150 million estate, from the basics to the complex to the exotica, with Mark Morris and Phil Sullivan, always on the first Tuesday of the month. March 2nd, we have a fantastic panel with Paul Hines and the fabulous Paul Greenwood and others on elder financial abuse. April 6th, we have a great panel presentation with the three leaders of the community foundations, Mark, Beth, and Christy Wilson of the San Diego Foundation, Jewish Community Foundation, and the Rancho Santa Fe Foundation. This is always just a power-packed presentation, and I think over the years has been our largest attendee group in our history, actually. So looking forward to that. Other upcoming events to be aware of: Rady Children's Hospital Foundation's Professional Symposium is a little different this year. It's going to be 3 different webinars beginning on January 28th. It'll be covering, or it's going to be presenting our great friend Tom Rogerson, and You'll certainly be getting more information from me shortly as far as registration information and details on Tom's presentation. Step Orange County has its annual institute with a great group of speakers on great topics. And again, you've got an email coming shortly on just the possibilities there. It's always a great one. And of course, with all of our webinars and Radies and STEP, it's a shame that they're not in person, because it's always fun to meet people and get together that way. We're certainly looking forward to getting back to meeting in person at Fairbanks Ranch Country Club. We will keep you posted on how that goes. In the meantime, do participate in our trifectas led by Pete Tentler. These are great ways to develop deeper relationships with small groups of professionals in a more intimate setting. Better in person, but still pretty good, doggone valuable. Please do go to our website, www.ncepc-sandiego.org. David Jacobs has been doing a knockout job in really improving that website. As you know, we have our hot topic ladies, Katie Swafford, Roberta Robinson, and Kristen Shepard. They're still on top of things and keeping me informed, and I try to pass it on to you all with events that are impacting all of us. And they're working on their own presentations later in the spring. And without any further ado, I want to introduce Larry Parente of Bank of America Private Bank, our sponsor. Larry, take it on from here.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. As Bill mentioned, my name is Larry Parente, and I'm a private client advisor at Bank of America Private Bank here in San Diego. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Bank of America Private Bank and the Parente Group is extremely proud to sponsor today's meeting, and even more excited to have Dennis share his experience around preserving legacies. So with the 100-year family enterprise as our backdrop, I thought it was important to note that our bank's history includes providing trust services for nearly 170 years now. Bank of America manages over $243 billion in trust assets and is the largest provider of personal trust services in the country. Within Bank of America, Private Bank provides clients a boutique-like experience with access to the extensive resources of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, including fiduciary investment management, trust services, customized credit, traditional banking solutions, and access to capital markets. And most recently, Bank of America Private Bank was named the best private bank for philanthropic services and the best private bank in North America for customer service in 2020 by Professional Wealth Management magazine. So needless to say, we have a long and rich history of helping individuals with their trust and investment management needs and solidifying their family's legacy. And it would be our pleasure to share this same level of service with your clients. And once Bank of America goes back to a work from the office posture, we're also slated to have a private bank office in the new office building at One Paseo in Del Mar Heights. So I look forward to a time when we can all get back together, grab a nice lunch nearby, or even host clients in the new space. Until then, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Parente Group. We have included our team overview and working with the private bank as part of our handouts. But I have personally spent the last 18 years as a wealth advisor to business owners, corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and families with significant wealth. My background as a licensed attorney in California and my experience at the law firm of Robeck, Flager, and Harrison, I think helps me bring a unique perspective to managing wealth across multiple generations. Our clients range from high net worth to ultra high net worth families with minimum relationships of $3 million or more in investable assets, deposits, or credit balances. The Parente Group provides complimentary consulting services to aid in the design and implementation of a successful wealth plan for our clients and their families. And our highest aim is to collaborate directly with our clients' attorneys and CPAs like you, and to simplify sophisticated wealth planning solutions so that clients may make confident and informed decisions about their business, their family, and their future. With that as our goal, our clients can rely on a disciplined process to determine which solutions are the most impactful to them and their family. And that means that beyond just investment management, our qualifying relationships include resources like pre and post-sale business transition planning, corporate equity compensation and retirement planning, family financial statement and cash flow analysis, and multi-jurisdictional trust and estate planning, including philanthropic solutions for clients who are charitably inclined. But as we do not practice law, we look to our advisors like you to draft and implement the right solutions for our clients. What we found, however, is that proactive planning discussions with our team can be successful in getting clients to take the necessary steps to keep their trust and estate plans accurate and up to date, and provide you the leverage you need to get clients to understand the importance of having the right plan in place. If we've learned anything about this current pandemic, it's that we should be more encouraging of our clients to be organized around the things that matter most. As it relates to delivering investment management services, I should first note that in addition to irrevocable trust investments, where the bank is corporate trustee and probably more of where you think of us serving, more than 75% of our business is investing for either revocable trusts or as agent for fiduciary on behalf of individual trustees. So in either case, through their various capacities as individual, agent for fiduciary, or trustee, our clients have access to a wide range of fiduciary investment management solutions across a broad spectrum of traditional, alternative, and non-financial asset classes. Our portfolio management team works in close partnership with the Bank of America Merrill Lynch Chief Investment Office, which is the #1 ranked global research firm in the country, and provides innovative, unique, and value-added investment strategies to affluent investors. Clients have access to an open architecture investment platform, which also includes a range of alternative investments like hedge funds, private equity, and managed futures. Environmental, social, and governance, or impact investing, is also available for clients with socially responsible investment goals. Additional investment management expertise is available through our fiduciary trust platform for non-financial asset classes as well, such as private business management, where, as an example, we can serve as sole member for LLCs when children of the family have no desire to transition to the family business. We also offer specialty asset management in the areas of real estate, farm and ranch, oil and gas, and timberland. And lastly, clients with qualifying relationships of typically 10 million or more also begin to have access to a suite of Bank of America family office capabilities. In the spirit of our topic today, I've included a piece from our family office team regarding the guiding principles behind designing a 100-year plan for our wealthiest families. Dennis, of course, is a rock star in this space and will be speaking to us today about the evolution of the 100-year family enterprise. So we wanted to highlight this piece and make sure you are aware that we enjoy collaborating closely with professionals like you and like Dennis to coordinate best practices and to help to guarantee the greatest success in passing on wealth for multiple generations. Along those lines, we also have the ability to implement administrative trust and perpetual trust planning solutions through our trust company in Delaware. Until recently, we were also beginning to selectively onboard AIM trusts for California clients as well. However, due to a recent California legislative proposal, our ability to do that moving forward has been placed on hold. As I'm sure you're aware, legislative proposal C suggested adding a new section to the Revenue and Tax Code to treat INGs as grantor trust effective as of January 1st, 2022. The result, of course, would be that INGs established by a California resident who is still a California resident as of January 1st, 2022, would be subject to California income taxation after that date. We anticipate that it's simply a matter of time before that comes to a vote. So we welcome a discussion with you about how we're still looking to structure alternative dynasty solutions for our clients, like slats, for example, and continue to try to achieve their legacy planning goals. Nevertheless, we have an extensive background in working with some of the country's wealthiest families and have the experience and the resources to deliver for our clients at the highest level. It would be our pleasure to collaborate with you as well, and I welcome a conversation around what elements of the planning process you would be more than happy to have us support if you knew that there was a team sophisticated enough to take that on for you and for your clients. I look forward to learning more about your practices and showing you how we try to impact our clients' lives in a positive way. Please enjoy Dennis Jaffe and contact me if you have any questions about the Parenti Group or our private bank team. Thank you so very much. I'll now turn things back over to Bill to introduce our speaker.
Larry, thank you so much. We really appreciate you and the Parenti Group and the Bank of America Private Bank for sponsoring this presentation. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker today. Dennis Jaffe is really an international thought leader in what I call the people side of planning, from family governance, family mission statements, preparing the family for the wealth and family enterprise succession planning. Dennis is a prolific speaker and writer. His books are all the seminal books in this arena. His presentation today, Building a Great Family, what I learned from interviewing 100 global 100-year family enterprises, is follows up on his book of the similar name. His other books, just to be noted, is Cross Cultures, How Global Families Negotiate Change Across Generations, Stewardship in Your Family Enterprise, Developing Responsible Family Leadership Across Generations, and Working with the Ones You Love. And as I said, these are really part of the seminal books that should be in the library of anybody that works in this world. Dennis is active in the Family Firm Institute, which awarded him the 2017 International Award for Service. And in 2005, he received the Beckert Award for Service to the Field. In 2020, he was awarded a special commendation as an individual thought leader in the field of wealth management by the Family Wealth Report. He also is an active speaker and participant in the Purposeful Planning Institute. And really, without any further ado, let me introduce you to Dennis Jaffe.
Well, let me share my screen. And let me, well, I'm delighted to be here. I'm in San Francisco, but I always look down to San Diego as a place to come and relax. And I've been there many times, and I'm delighted to be speaking to the State Council and learn. So let me talk a little bit about where this came from, and then present the highlights. So the book that came out actually 1 month before the pandemic shutdown. I was about to go on a global book tour, and the book came out, and the next week the world shut down. So before that, for 5 years, I had the opportunity of traveling around and interviewing great families all over the world, from every continent, 20 different countries, and stories of these families. So where did the research start? Well, I made a very, very good career move about 5 years ago, which is I retired. And after 38 years of being a professor, I was finally faced with, well, what do I do now? And I had a number of questions. I've been working in the field for many years, but if you work in the field of family business and family enterprise, the more you work, the more you get confused and the more questions you have. And so I was wondering about a number of things. One is I was wondering whether there was a common experience around the world. There were every country in the world, the foundation of it is family business, family enterprise, family wealth, and commonalities. And the other thing is I wanted to look at successful families. The media seems to love to tell stories of family feuds, and there's a kind of a Schadenfreude, a kind of a moral joy in seeing families get their comeuppance. But I noticed that the families that were most successful are in many ways the quietest and the most below the radar. So I wanted to seek out and look at families that were successful. How did I define successful? Successful families that had been together for more than 3 generations as both a business or often a set of businesses, and also retain their identity as a family. They were large, and the average family in my study has a net worth of over $800 million. So that they're very often huge, huge ventures, and they still had their own family identity after many many years, even if they had as quote the family contained even 100 or hundreds of family members. So what I wanted to see, I wanted to look at commonalities. I wanted to hear the story of their evolution over time. So with a 100-year family, for example, in the fourth, fifth generation, it isn't just about being a giant family. They can look back and say, aha, here's what we did way back in the first or second generation that really made a difference for us. So by looking at 100 years, point of being 100 years, they can look back and say, this worked. This was, and not only that, their lives weren't perfect. And so when I interviewed, and usually I interviewed a family member from two different generations, a family leader, and I asked them to just kind of share their experience and look back at what were the crises that you overcame and what were the challenges that you had to meet. So I call it the evolutionary journey, rather than, I'm not looking at a family in one point in time and say, what are you doing right now to be successful? I'm looking at what are things that you do and how did they evolve? So the next couple of minutes, I'm going to take you on a tour of what I learned in terms of 7 basic insights that come from these families. Now the book, and when I got the book, I was a little surprised. I've been writing and writing and writing and over the years. And I want to mention, by the way, that the major support over the years for this major sponsor was Bank of America. And I would be really remiss in if I didn't mention their incredible support and no interference, just really supporting this work. So I interviewed these families, and I wanted to learn from the best. I wanted to learn what they were doing that got them through all these generations, and how did they learn. So I interviewed family leaders from 100, and now we're continuing the research, so we're up to about 120 families so far who've passed the 3rd generation as a business and also with a shared identity as a family. And we call them generative families because they create wealth across the generations. One of the things that we've been learning from this research is that we've been challenging many myths. And one of the first myths that we learned from these families is the myth that oh, some family founder makes a great fortune and then each generation spends it down until 3rd generation, there's nothing. And these families value generation, financial and non-financial, continued over the generations. And sometimes great wealth was made in the 2nd, 3rd generation. Sometimes there were different pockets of growth and development. And the families did many things that added value, not just create one business. So let's go and take a little journey and share some of the things that I learned. The first and loudest learning was that family businesses are not just one type of business. A family business by its very nature is different than non-family and publicly held businesses in 2 different ways. One is, if you own a share of Tesla, if you own a share of Apple, whatever it is, you really have no personal relationship with the other. You all just want to make money on it. You want to be successful and you like company. But in a family business, the owners have a personal relationship that precedes being a business, and they care about more than financial returns. So we're all family members related to each other, and we have a number of different things that we're concerned about. We're not unconcerned about making money, but that isn't all there is. And the second is, and this is where the title of my book, Borrowed from Your Grandchildren, comes from, is people that own things are not just thinking of themselves. they're looking ahead and they want to create a legacy for their children, their grandchildren, and some families even talk about 7 generations. As Bank of America does, they want to plan generations ahead because they see themselves as stewards of the wealth for their grandchildren. Now, these two things, relationship and long-term focus, make, I would say, the family business very different from other kinds of businesses. So let's look at what we learned. They're more than just a business.
Just to interrupt you.
They're sometimes several businesses, sometimes many diversified businesses, sometimes a family office. And they're both a family and a business. And because the family members care about each other and are connected, they have a shared mission that is beyond financial returns. They're continually reinventing themselves. And when we talk about the leadership and moving through generations, they're just one leader. It may have been one person, but generations, many paths and many leaders. Let's see how that works out.
Hey, Dennis, just to interrupt you for 1 second.
Insight that we got from our interview.
Dennis, I'm going to take you off video for a sec because...
You want me to go off video?
Yeah, please. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Should I continue?
Yeah, please continue.
Okay, if you want me to turn off my video, I will.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great.
The first insight, that'd be great. Let me turn it off. It'll take a second.
Okay, and while Dennis is doing that, I just wanted to say we'll be taking questions and Q&A in the at the end. And so if you have questions, feel free to submit them via the chat for Dennis. And as he mentioned, he's in Mexico, so we're just getting the audio difficulties figured out, but it looks like he is all set now with his video off, and hopefully we'll be able to hear him.
Okay, well, this should go. So I'm going to go through the insights, and the book is it's a long book, and the book has 100 or more stories of families. So the things that I'm talking about may seem a little abstract, but in the book there are stories of all these different families in their own words, what they did. So the first, and in some ways the loudest insight I had, is that the families made 2 major decisions in their development that affected who they are. The first is the founders built a great business. They built sometimes a huge business, sometimes a successful, small, but enduring business. But they built a great business that brought wealth to the family beyond what they could use as individuals. Then, and this is not necessarily a choice made by the family founder, the next generation, sometimes the 3rd generation, made a second choice, which is has to do with what do they want to do with the wealth that they created. And they made a choice to create a great family. And this is something that because that was what they wanted to do with their wealth. Now,
Dennis,
the first thing I learned,
can you rewind 30 seconds? Sorry, can you rewind 30 seconds? We lost you there.
Are you losing my voice?
Yeah, we lost the last 30 seconds of what you said, if you wouldn't mind backing up.
Okay. So the heirs, they want to create a great family, which means they want to invest their wealth. They say, what is it worthwhile for us to do with our wealth? And their choices, they say, what we want to do is create a great family. And they get together and decide what that is, and they make an investment. So they're not creating a great family so that the family can make more money. They have wealth, and they're saying, what is important for us to do with it? Now, when they talk about creating a great family, the question is, what do they mean? They don't mean just a nuclear family, the mother, the father, the children. By the third or fourth generation, they may have 100 families. And so they define themselves as almost like a tribe or a clan. They're a group of families that are tied together by identity, have the same grandfather or grandfather. They have special institutions, they get together. And even though the family members have moved in all different directions, they still come together regularly and see themselves as one group. And even so, they're continually reinventing themselves. So what are the concerns and the things that come up in these tribes in terms of who are we? They ask themselves questions like, what do we want to do with our wealth? What kind of a future can we create for our children? What impact do we have on the community? Who are we? What do we want to do together? How do we be responsible and grateful for the wealth that we have? Now, looking at these key questions, none of them are really about making more money. They're non-financial questions. And one thing that we have to understand about multi-generational families is they're about creating wealth, non-financial wealth. Families talk about 4 kinds of wealth beyond financial wealth. They talk about the wealth of who they are, their history as a family. They're known for something, and they want to build that identity. They want to build the things that they're known for and keep their reputation and develop it. They have relationship capital, which means they work well together. They know each other. They've grown up together, and so they're able to make decisions. And when they work well, they work together. They invest in human capital, the next generation. They see their children as worth investing in terms of education, in terms of training, in terms of learning. And they really see that what their children do is the source of their wealth. And finally, they want to give back to the community. So the families in our study talk about creating wealth, but when they talk about creating wealth, they mean non-financial as well as financial wealth. And the family organizes around all kinds of wealth, not just financial wealth. The second insight, and this is the major transition that a generative family has to make from the first generation to later generations. They talk about making a culture shift from a patriarch and a kind of a paternalistic culture to another kind of culture. The person who creates wealth, we all know very well, this is a person who usually did not come from wealth. The business is who they are, sometimes to the detriment of their family. They are improviser, they do things by
Dennis, we've lost you again. I'm going to need you to go back about 30 seconds again, please.
Is this is exactly the best place to grow up. And these patriarchs were not sometimes great at developing a great family. So it fell to other people.
Dennis, could you repeat the last slide?
Sometimes spouses. What?
Could you repeat the last slide, please? We missed that most.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the. So the wealth creator is a patriarch who is in control, who's has difficulty trusting and sharing, and is totally absorbed in the business. And this is a challenge for the family. So the family grows up, and they face a patriarch who's getting older, who's been so successful. Why should I change? They feel like they have to take care of the family. They're not comfortable sharing information. They're kind of secretive. They avoid conflict. They want everybody to be happy, but if they're not happy, they don't want to hear about it. They have a hard time letting go, and they're not open to new ideas. The family faces a challenge that they have to overcome. And this is a challenge that every great family has to overcome if they want to succeed, which is to get beyond the patriarchal, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to do things myself, just be happy with what you have. Because if they treat their young people that way, the young people grow up and become passive and withdrawn. They feel like, what can I contribute? Why am I important? I have nothing to do. And so they're not going to be active. And this is a challenge that every family has to face. So all of the families and talked about a transition, second generation, third generation, sometimes a very wrenching transition from the paternalistic, one person, not closed, improvised system to a shared system that was transparent, that was collaborative, where there was trust, people working together, professional, and things were clear and explicit. And this is a culture change. This is a major change. And by moving into partnership, there were a number of things that these families did that were very important to ensuring their future. The next insight is that just change the culture and become who they were. They needed to set up governance, which meant they had to set up a system. They were a large organization and they needed to organize it. So the first thing, and this is something that we're all familiar with as estate planners and business consultants, is they had to set up a professional business. They had to set up a board, they had to set up an owner's council, had to think about having maybe a non-family leader, an exit policy, independent directors. And so they had a business governance. But in addition, these families were looking at the culture change and they needed to create a broader sense of governance, not just for the business, but for the whole enterprise. And there are 5 themes that came up in governance. The first is that if there isn't transparency, how can you have a say? So they had to share information widely, not just to 1 or 2 people, but across the family. They had to have clear agreements so that people knew where they stand. But as a number of the families said, the agreements don't do anything unless there's a group of people which implements them. So they created councils, groups, task forces. They had clear roles and boundaries that the people in the family, there were many, many people in the family, not just one person, they had to have separate roles. And it had to be clear, if you were working for the family, what is your role? What is your authority? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? And the family members had to be accountable to each other. And these 5 elements make up governance. So in these 100-year families, the second thing that these families began to do is to develop what they called family governance to govern the non-financial activities that these families developed. They had to build trust with each other, and trust means you were vulnerable and you really depend on each other. They had to know each other. They had to be clear about their values. Some people had differences. They had to celebrate their history. They had to organize themselves to do what they wanted to do. They wanted to develop human capital. So they had a lot of activities that the family needed to take care of that had nothing to do with the business. And this is what we call family governance. Most of these families call it some sort of a family council to do these activities. It was like the family council is alongside the board of directors and is the board of directors for the family. It's the family council plans family activities, family meetings. It keeps family members, helps them be aligned. It helps them, each individual, do what they want to do and use the family's resources. They engage and develop and do things together. The family council is kind of the community center and the government for the family, just like the board is the center of the business. 4th insight is that these families, almost none of them probably 90% of them, by the fourth generation, they were not a single business. About half of them had sold the business. Some of them had taken great wealth out of the business, formed a family office, they had real estate, they had family ranches, they had a foundation. And so fourth generation families are not a family business. They are what we call a family enterprise portfolio. And so this is an evolution that if a family is a fourth generation family, they're probably not running a single restaurant or having one business. They probably have a portfolio. Half of them had sold the legacy business. Many of them, maybe a majority, had a non-family CEO. So the family had to exercise its direction, not by running the business directly, but by overseeing. They had multiple goals and multiple ventures. So they were a portfolio. And this is another thing that enables them to develop this kind of family governance. And so there were four kinds of transformations that we saw in these families, and not in order necessarily, but the four things that they needed to do is the first thing that happens is with a successful business, the family begins to accumulate wealth. And in a generation or so, wealth is significant and they have to manage that wealth. They have to begin to think about what do they want to do in addition to just, they can't just keep reinvesting it in one company. And so they begin to face choices. The second thing that happens, and this is very important because every family over generations is going to have some family members that say, well, this is very nice, but I don't really want to be part of this anymore. I want to go off on my own. I don't want to be part of this mega entity, particularly when there are hundreds of family members. And so family members have a pruning process where people in each generation can leave and say, I don't want to be part of this. And so that the people who are in it, third or fourth generation, are not all of the family members, but they're the family members who want to be there and want to be part of this. The third thing we've mentioned is that these families diversify. They have one business, they have other business, they have different investments, they have family real estate, they do different things, they create a foundation. So they create a diversified group by the third, fourth generation. But the fourth thing that these families do is they organize family governance to build and sustain their identity as a family. And so when we look at the evolution of these families, we see these four different things happen to them as they grow from one nuclear family to many. Families kind of represent this as a journey. They talk about how well we did this in the second generation, and then the third generation had some different ideas and they moved to different places in the world. And so the third generation was organized in a different way. And they talk about a journey of different things. They don't just say, okay, it's time to do a family counselor, it's time to do this. Each of the things that they do arises out of a need and a challenge. So they don't become complicated all in one generation. They keep creating more and more complexity. The fifth insight is that this is what we call the family alliance. And these families, by the third or fourth generation, they talked about how there were different constituencies. There were, first of all, the elders. As our life expectancy gets greater and greater, the formal control is with the elders, but the elders begin to bring in trusted advisors, non-family managers, family office managers, business CEOs. And they begin to have a number of advisors who deal with all of the different entities. There's a third group that comes up, and this is the group that I think is critical to the success, but often is a challenge to the family, which is the next generation. Next generation is a group that doesn't exist in a normal public business. The next generation are people who are in the family and they expect to be owners, but often they're not owners, or they're owners of a little bit, but it's in trust. So the next generation are people who are future owners, and future owners only exist in a family business. And so the challenge, and I think in troubled families, what happens is these three different entities kind of go off on their own. The elders have their own, the trusted advisors are professionals, and the next generation often gets neglected, or feels dissatisfied. So there are two things that that are common in these families to include and bring these three groups to work together. The first is, and this is an interesting thing, as I ask people in these families, well, what were the biggest things innovations in your family, and where did they come from? It's like when there was a new idea, who had the idea to buy a new business? Who had the idea to create the family office? Who did it? And these families, about 60% of the big innovations that the families had came from the younger generation. And in a way, these younger generation people were not people that had formal authority. They weren't asked what do you want to do. They came to the family with a new idea. They had something that they saw that they wanted. They were interested in social responsibility, and they began to lobby and ask for support from the older generation, and found the professional advisors and the elders willing to listen to them. They created a plan, and this is the way innovation took place. The other thing that these families did, which they created something like a junior board and sometimes a family bank. A junior board is basically is when you take people who are in the next generation who want to learn about the business and you educate them. They sometimes observe board meetings. They sometimes are on board committees. They sometimes have a learning group where they come together, internships, and they begin to find out and also begin to be invited to share ideas with the business. Family bank is a way that the family says, we have great resources and wealth, and we want to support new ideas by our young people. These ideas are sometimes philanthropic ideas, social enterprises. They're sometimes financial ideas. They're sometimes investment ideas. They're not always great. They can't be accepted uncritically, but the family has a way of investing in its family members and a formal process for that. The sixth insight, and this is a really important one, and again, it's something that only takes place in a family business, is that the family begins to say, well, the new generation, the young people in our family, these are our product. When you're a family, what are you producing? You're producing new generations of talented and capable people. So they look at the next generation, and the next generation in a family, a wealthy family, is not just happy people. They're people that have a hard time sometimes finding motivation. They want to say, well, everything has been done. What can I do to really, how can I really make a name for myself in this family? They sometimes have different values. Sometimes they've grown up with wealth and they don't really understand building trust or dealing with risk. They don't want to let their parents down. They want to be treated fairly. They want to know the rules, and they need to learn how to work together, not just compete with each other. So the challenge is that the older generation has to create a learning process for the next generation. One of the really important things that these families do is they overcome the tendency in wealthy families to basically not talk about the wealth. It's like, we're rich, but we're not going to say anything about it. We're not going to tell anybody about it. Somehow it's a mystery. And these families say, no, this is something we have to talk about. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be raised in a wealthy family. We're going to talk about what's fair. We're going to talk about what we expect of the next generation. We're going to talk about what the next generation can expect from us. And so these families have family conversations, not just about organizing activities, but about what do we want to do? What's important to us, and how are we going to use our wealth? Because there are many, many new ideas and many things that come up in the family, and the family has to have a place to talk about what is the money going to be used for. It can't just say, here is what the trust says, here's what we're doing. There are 4 things these families did to prepare the next generation. The first thing is that the older generations and the younger generations, and sometimes there's 3, even 4 adult generations in these families with the long lives that we leave, and they have to get to know each other. So they have annual family meetings, they have committees, they have learning groups, task forces, and there are lots of different ways that generations get to know each other and work together. Transparency means that the information, not just financial information and big briefing books, but really the meaning of what we're doing, the essence of it. If it's a ranch, for example, learning about sustainability. If it's a business, looking at our responsibility, looking at how it's organized. If it's investments, sharing not just what we're invested in, but what these investments do. So there's a lot of sharing and transparency, which is part of the connection. The third thing that the families have to do is to develop the capability of the next generation, that when you grow up in a wealthy family, you have to know things that an average kid doesn't have to know. You have to learn about trusts. You have to learn about financial responsibility. You have to learn about different kinds of organization. You have to learn about how to invest money and protecting and taking care of yourself. So there's a lot of mentoring and development for young people, and not just young people who go into the family office or the family business, but also to go off on their own and to do something that's important to them. And so the family invests in family education, mentoring, and development programs that are often very, very elaborate and very extensive. The fourth thing, and this is often overlooked, is the family has to have something to attract the next generation to want to be part of it. Let's consider a member of a third, fourth generation family. They may live in a different country. They may know their cousins. They may know the family office. But what is it that makes them want to be part of it? They have to get to know, for example, the young people that are in their generation. They have to like them. They have to find something that they can do. So the families switch from saying, who do we want to have run the business, to ask themselves, how can we make what we're doing attractive enough so that all these wonderful people in the next generation will want to be part of it? What kind of roles can we offer them? What kind of opportunities? What kinds of things can they do in this family that they couldn't do on their own? So these are the four things that the next generation does. And the final insight that I want to talk about is investing in the shared future. These families are not just about themselves. The idea of who is our family grows. For example, family members often have advisors and employees that have been with the family, and some families have families that have been with them for 2 or 3 generations. And they say, well, these people are part of our family. And they come from a community, and they've grown up in that community and gone to school in that community. And they say, well, we're really part of this community also. And ideas of social responsibility grow up naturally. When a family has a lot, other people in the community look to them to be leaders. They don't want to grow up and say, well, I'm from a rich family and I'm great and I'm special and I have a better car and a better house. That isn't the way they are. People want to do something that's valuable. They don't want to be seen as just entitled brats. So they begin to have the younger generation takes on values about ESG. So there are 3 things that families do. They have an ESG focus in their business and their investments. They engage in philanthropy to serve the community. And they look at their wealth, not just their investments, to have impact and to do something. And what's exciting about these families is these service activities, these ways of giving back, these ways of investing in the future are things that the family does together. It's not something that they just set up a foundation and name a foundation head and go off and have the foundation do things. They want to be involved in it. They want to be on the board. They want to be finding things to do. And this leads to tough conversations. Should I invest in a new branch of a hospital, or my parents' alma mater, or should we be investing in women-led businesses in Guatemala? Who are we? How we can't be everything to everybody. So what do we want to do? How do we do it? How do we want to be involved? And so the family finds itself getting together by the fourth generation to talk about social responsibility and social impact. So these are the 7 things that we found out. We've looked at these families, and in looking at what they do, we see that these families are incredibly wealthy. They're the leaders in every country in civic life. But because they're a family enterprise, they're not just about creating mega businesses and high returns. They're really looking at themselves as communities, reaching out into the wider community, developing the next generation. And a family enterprise is really about family. It's about community as well as about business. And that's what I've learned from these 100 families. And I think this is a theme and a more common theme about family enterprise than the common shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves and entitled brats and spending the money and throwing it away. There really is a deep sense of responsibility in these families that I've learned. And it may not be every family, but these successful families tend to have these virtues in how they work together. So thank you, and I'm open to comments, questions, sharing.
Hey, Dennis.
Yeah.
We have one question. In your view, what is the minimum size of business value, family net worth where, you and, Jay Hughes and the rest can really help to make a difference?
The minimum size? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of working, all of us work with families that are just starting out and that are smaller, and we don't know what family is going to be around in 100 years. So I think those of us who are working as advisors and servants for these families are saying, let's help these families create this kind of a wonderful future. Let's look at these examples of the 100-year families, and let's help these families grow up to move in that direction. So when I'm looking at myself as a service professional, I'm seeing some very small families that aren't yet family businesses that want to become one.
Okay. And then continuing on, with the mantra from over the 30 or 40 years, the shirt sleeves and 3 generations. What is your experience as far as how often do the business really make it to the 3rd generation?
Well, there's no disagreement that very few businesses, family businesses, make it to the 3rd generation, but very few businesses of any sort make it to 3rd generation. They particularly these days, they tend to be bought and sold and evolve, and now there's the pandemic. It's a challenge. And so I don't think, for example, in terms of, I think there was a basic misunderstanding in the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. The studies that they were based on were about, is this family business around in 2 or 3 generations? But they didn't study whether these families were still wealthy. So if a family sold the family business in the 3rd generation for $1.5 billion, they would be down as well, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. They lost the business, but actually the family would be fabulously wealthy. So I think that we have no idea, but we certainly know that it's very hard to sustain family wealth over generations. And I'm not particularly concerned, well, is it 30%? Is it 40%? I'm interested in how can I help an individual family do what they can to anticipate the needs of the future and to set themselves up to be creating non-financial wealth and to be stewards and to be developing the next generation and to be serving the community and not how many there are.
Following up on my first question, obviously your bread and butter is dealing with the $100 million family, the $500 million family, the $1 billion family, but on the lower end, let's just pick 10 to 20 million as a range. Can you tell me what you and your brethren kind of help with them in moving forward to go from G1 to G2 and then obviously further into G3, 4, and 5? Just to give
this is something that I think all of us share. So from what we've learned from 100-year families, the first thing that we need to do is to begin to say, how do we create an environment where we develop and prepare the next generation? So you have to build transparency. You have to help the older generation see that they need to become mentors. They're not just bosses and running the wealth, but they need to teach the next generation. I think another thing that we see is in the next second or third generation, the younger generation has to come together and learn about the business and look at each other and say, you're my cousins. Do I want to be your partner for the rest of your life, or is it enough that we're cousins? Let's all go our own way. So families have to make the choice in the second generation and then again in the third generation to stay together. And they also have to develop the capabilities to do what needs to be done to sustain the family wealth in the next generation, which is always different than what the people had to do in the first generation. They're not a startup anymore. They're not necessarily a single business anymore. If it was for example, one restaurant that the family ran for 30 years, and then by the second generation, they've started to develop 3 or 4 different things, and they begin to manufacture food, and they move from being a restaurant to a food manufacturing and a group with a number of different restaurants and ventures. So that they're beginning to look ahead and redefine the family, but they're also looking at each other and saying, can we work together? And not just compete with each other to see who's the biggest and who's the best and who's going to be the leader, but how can we work together and do what needs to be done? So you begin to look at the themes and you begin to say, what's the first step we need to take in each of these areas? And you begin to bring the family together to look ahead to what do we want to be in as a family, and also what do we want to be as a business or as an enterprise.
Taking advantage of the stories that are in your book, maybe you could pick a few to talk about relating to the next couple questions.
Right.
How do family businesses choose the next leader and deal with those family members who do not have the capability or the capacity to add value?
Well, this is like a lot of things. The family begins by posing an either-or choice. How do we choose a leader? And these families, what we see is that it's not about a leader. In the third generation, for example, one third generation family said, we have 17 slots, leadership slots. We have a foundation, and the foundation can have 5 family members. We have a board of directors, so the board of directors can have representatives of each of the different family branches. We have a number of family, we have a family council and a family council leader and family task forces for family education. And so there are all kinds of, we have an investment group looking at new investment ideas. We have a ranch and a family vacation home, and we have a group, we need a team that can maintain and look after that. So the family has to develop a sense of responsibility that everybody will take a role in the business. It isn't about there's going to be one leader, and often the older generation thinks, who's going to run the business? And they miss the fact that they need maybe 6 or 8 people to step up into leadership roles. So that the families, some of the things that these families did, which I found interesting is they created a family development group where they would evaluate. And if a person said, well, I want to eventually be on the board of directors. And so they would say, well, if you want to be on the board of directors, you have to do a number of things. You have to go to a board director training. You have to serve on the board of some other family's business and learn, make your mistakes with some other family. You have to have an MBA or a master's degree. You have to have work experience. So they create a set of requirements so that the person can develop themselves. And then when there's a post open, let's say a board membership, the board, the people on the board who are recruiting a board member ask for candidates. And in order to be a candidate for that, the family member has to say, well, I have basically met the requirement. I am a candidate for this role. And so there's a whole kind of family development and employment committee. So those are ways to do it. So mostly these families begin to say, well, it isn't about, they have to challenge the question. Say, it isn't about just getting one person to be the leader. It's about developing a sense of leadership, which we call stewardship, where everybody in the family is willing to take a role. They can have an outside job. They can be raising children. They can be doing all kinds of wonderful things, but they have to say, I want to give some time to the family. And so they have to change the question and then begin to look at it in a different way.
Yes, and of course, I think what we're all hearing is every family is different. The family has to sort out where they want to go and think long term. And there's the perfect example, that you hit on is it's not selecting a leader. It's looking at building the whole family around the stewardship function. We do have a question on how to deal with an elder and what is the most successful way to get them to exit, completely, partially, gradually, any stories. And of course, if you have 100 families, there were probably 100 stories, but take a shot.
Well, first of all these wonderful families that are successful have some very painful stories that they share. And what happens is, and I think particularly today, when life expectancy and productive life expectancy is going up. So let's say you're a 94-year-old person that's perfectly able to come into work and perfectly capable of doing it. But by you coming into work and running the business, you have prevented your children who are now maybe in their 70s and your grandchildren who are maybe in their 50s and your great grandchildren who are coming from taking productive roles. So you have to become a little bit of a statesman and say, it's time to leave. And many elders many families have a retirement age. There was one family, for example, a wonderful family that has a retirement age of 60. And so I'm talking to a family member who's 85, and I said, wait a minute. He was a famous CEO. Hired at age 60. They said, well, wait a minute, you're 85. What have you been doing? Oh, he said, we have another family tradition. We come from a little town somewhere in the U.S. And the tradition is when a family member steps down at 60, there's a congressional seat, and family member runs for that congressional seat and becomes a congressman, and the congressman takes on a leadership role in the country that other people wouldn't want to do, because we're not personally ambitious and looking to our career. We want to serve, and so there's a public service, and for 3 generations, I'm not saying this is fair or this is good or this is reason, but for 3 generations, the family CEO, when they retired, basically ran for and was elected to Congress. And so they have 3 generations of congressmen as well. So the other thing that we learn from these families is that very often there's a lot of contentiousness in the 2nd generation. And a number of the families, the third generation, the grandchildren get together and they say, you know, we're really tired of seeing our uncles and aunts and everybody fighting, and we hate what they're doing, and we want to see, we share a lot and we want to get beyond it. And literally in a couple of cases, they've said, we want the older generation to step aside. Now, they have no formal ability to do that. They can't vote them out because they're not the owners. So they use their moral authority to say, look, if you don't do this, we're, you know, basically all going to quit. We're just not going to be part of this family. And unless you give us a meaningful role and you begin to hire a non-family leader and begin to prepare for the next generation, we're out. So they use their persuasiveness and they demand a change. They talk about, these families talked about, in some families, the hurt extends for a generation or two, or sometimes one branch of the family, when the person gets kicked out, one branch leaves the family, and sometimes a generation or so later they come back in. Sometimes they just separate. So it's painful. But I think that the initiative comes from the younger generation, and they use their kind of moral authority as the future owners to say, we need to see this happen. And that's how it happened. But there's never an easy path, because the people that they want to step down often basically have the voting control, and they have to want to do it. You can't make them.
Another kind of over on the professional side kind of question, as far as trustees in trusts that are used to pass on wealth and what have you, do you typically see a family member as trustee, a corporate trustee, or a professional fiduciary as the people in charge?
All of them. So I didn't ask enough about trusts, unfortunately, but it seems that all of these families have some sort of trust. But they have trustees, often professional trustees, and they also, by the third or fourth generation, they begin to have independent board members on their board of their family office, on the board of their family business, the legacy business, on the board of their foundation. So they begin to have independent advisors on the board, as well as working as consultants to them.
This is an interesting question. You know, we've got your most current book, but could you just give us a quick synopsis on the difference between each of the books?
Okay, well, thank you. I don't often get asked this. So, Working with the Ones You Love was written back in the last century. I love to say that, in the 90s. And this was a book at the beginning of the first decade of interest in family business. And it really talks about a family business and succession and working together in a kind of a nuclear family through succession. And it's a kind of a how-to book, and there's a lot of reflection questions. And so this is a kind of a book. It's still out almost 30 years later, and so people are still reading it. The Stewardship in Your Family Enterprise is a book that made up of columns that I wrote about different dilemmas that face family. How do you deal with conflict? How do you set up a board? How do you choose a successor? How do you set up a family council? How do you define values? So there's 50 different little bitlets that talk about common challenges. Borrowed from Your Grandchildren is a huge book, because it's basically 5 years of my life, and it was really telling the stories of these 100-year families. And then one of the questions that everybody asked after, when they would look at Borrowed from Your Grandchildren, say, well, these are all the similarities, but they're 20 different countries. They're all over the world. Aren't there cultural differences? And so my colleague, Jim Grubman, who many of you know, and I wrote a little book together about what are the cultural differences that we see in different families around the world. In the East, the harmony culture, the honor culture, um, and the individualistic culture of the West, and how do these cultures operate differently when they work as family enterprises, and then how are they all blending as the world becomes more global. So those are the 4 books, and there are many other books, of course, in the field that look at different aspects of this. They're all on Amazon, by the way. Sorry.
You bet. Well, hey, thank you so much. That's a great synopsis, and of course, the stewardship one looks pretty interesting because it seems to relate to each of the questions we've kind of had that
Right.
have kind of popped up. So at least there would be a good starting point. Thinking about just G1 and new wealth, the 40-year-old who hits the home run is now worth 20 million. Where do they, what are the 1 or 2 most important first steps that they should take? In my travels, I'm out of the CPA side, but the CPA side, the attorneys, they know nothing about your world.
Right.
So it seems to me, it's like, well, we've got to find someone that's at least conducive with understanding that world, your world, and start adding some pieces there. But maybe you have some comments that you could add there.
Well, this is a new situation that the previous literature on family business had kind of older family members and younger generations growing up, and now we have people that have essentially retired with great wealth at 40, and they're a new career path. So there's a number of themes, I think, in the philanthropic world. We see a lot of them. There are families that do philanthropy together. There are people that retire and become, a la Bill Gates, that become philanthropists for the second half of their lives, and their children will more than likely follow a philanthropic lifestyle and education rather than move into the legacy business. But we're still beginning to see, and of course, the pandemic and the global changes are changing the game a little bit. We're still looking at what is the new wealth going to do, and how is it going to develop. But what we do know is that even from the stories of the people with new wealth who are very young, is they want to educate their children and bring them into the dialogue about wealth even when they're young. They want to do service and talk about what is it like to grow up wealthy, and how can we do that with a sense of pride rather than guilt, and what do we want to do as a family. And these are family discussions that I think are happening among families that are new wealth. These families are creating family offices or moving into multi-family of the have together, a number of families together to talk about these issues. And I think that's a learning process.
This one may be beyond what you really do. You would probably look to the attorneys and CPAs to deal with how do family businesses survive death tax going from one generation to the next. Obviously, the answer is, well, they start planning and they plan early, but take a shot at that.
Well, here's the difference. So I get called in a lot, all the time, and I think the planning, and this is something, the planning is often narrowly focused on preserving the wealth and doesn't engage enough in the discussion of what is the wealth for. So tax saving is wonderful, preserving the wealth, setting up trusts, all those are wonderful, but I still keep finding that these conversations don't also include the family getting together and saying, what do we want to be in the next generation? What do we want our children to do? How are we going to what do we want to do together as a family? So to me, there's nothing wrong with what's being done, but it has to include the discussions about non-financial wealth in parallel. And then when the trust is set up or an estate plan, it has to listen to what the family wants to achieve, and as well as how do you do that with the least amount of taxes and estate problems. So it's really a multi-professional teamwork that's needed.
Of course, a perfect segue into thinking about John A. Warnick and his purposeful trusts that deal with the people side. And then, of course, also because he's the big ACTAC fellow, addressing estate tax minimization and all the rest. But, and of course, when you think about that.
I was saying John's group, the Purposeful Planning Institute, brings together people from all the different professions to consider those things and how they can all work together.
Yeah, so it's a great way to get a start in looking at this people side. Your books, amongst others, would again help all of the professionals at least be more conversant in that topic. Going back to that first question for the 40-year-old who has hit the home run, clearly we're dealing with preparing the family for the wealth, and starting training of the 9-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 16-year-olds with understanding the financial world. And of course, philanthropy is a great piece of that as far as bringing the family together for the kind of those common discussions. Let me check on one last question here. For the myriad of families that you've dealt with over the years, can you talk about the wealth advisors, the attorneys, the CPAs, and how they've interacted with you and the family? And this kind of gets back to that point I just mentioned. CPAs and attorneys stereotypically don't get it. Wealth managers, CFPs certainly might a little bit more, but can you talk about how they've added to the success in working with the multi-generational family?
Yeah, let me say, first of all of these families work with advisors, and they had bad experiences and good experiences. And I think the good experiences were where the advisor didn't try to do everything for them, but brought in other people. So family members, for example, they want mentors for the next generation. They want to create a vision for the family that then gets pulled into the estate plan. They want to develop a working family all the time and get things done. So I think the model is that these families were able to work with a team of advisors, and the advisors didn't do these things for the family, they did these things with the family. And so the family meetings that I have, for example, they often include a family office executive, they often include a financial planning, a legal advisor, and they're at the meeting, but they're there as an advisor. They're listeners and learners as well as resources. So there's a kind of a teamwork in these families, and these families are large, so they need a number of different team members.
And I would assume it's much more helpful for you and the whole team if everyone has some idea what you do, as far as that.
Well, it's about doing it. It's doing it together. I mean, like if I have a family meeting, I don't just say I'm going to run a family meeting and you stay away. I say, well, let's work together and let's have a meeting about philanthropy, or let's talk about estate ideas, and let's get the family to have small groups and talk about what's important to them, and let's have values. Let's do values work, and I like to do it with people, rather than just I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to handle it. You guys stay out. That's a very bad way to work, I think.
You bet. Hey, we just have a couple more minutes, and I thought I would cheat, and maybe you could tell just a couple stories about the Texas ranch family that I heard at the Purposeful Planning Institute virtual webinar. Just any insights that you could pull from them. I mean, I thought it was, of course, fascinating that it was a ranch founded in 1862 or whenever it was, but we'll let that be your wrap up, and we thank you, and I'll let you go ahead.
Well, that's a great story. So, the family has been through 7 generations. For a while, they were a ranch. Then for a generation or two, their major income was oil. And then they began to diversify. And over the generations, they now have several hundred family member owners. So they have a number of different branches, and the branches have different names, and they are going in different directions. But there's been every other generation, a leader emerged in the family that really dedicated himself, and once it was a woman, to bringing all of the different parts of the family together. And through it all, this family for over 100 years, they've had an annual meeting on the ranch. This was the first year, actually, the pandemic was the first year they didn't have it in 130 years. And this people come to this. It's about 10 days, and they learn about the business, and they get to know each other, and they have fun together, and they have learning groups, and they have resource people. And so there's a real sense of community, even though it only meets for 10 days a year. Everybody feels part of it. And then each of the different branches and many different people have started different businesses. So there's a lot of individuality, and a lot of people can go off in their own way, so that you don't feel constrained that you have to be part of this big thing. You know it's always there, and you know you're always part of it, but each of the branches has gone in different directions. So there's an individualism, and there's community, and it's an example of what hundreds of families around the world do, but these are not things that are publicly advertised, and they don't make it into the front page of the Wall Street Journal, except when they buy or sell something. So maybe that's a good place to stop.
Hey, Dennis, again, thank you so very much for being here. You know, that I do certainly trying to present these kind of presentations over the years. To me, there's nothing more important than addressing the people side of the planning. And I certainly commend everybody to your books. We've got a great list as far as starting at ground zero, going to the stewardship book that talks about some of the individual problems here. And then, of course, the newest book on the borrowed from your grandchildren is filled with stories. I've passed it on myself and been through it a couple of times. So again, thank you so very much. And we'll look forward to having you back, and you have a great time, and let you get back on the beach.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for putting this thing together.